Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us tonight are the Independent's Miguel Delaney and Charlie Wyatt from The Sun. Evening to you both. Let's quickly run everyone through the back pages, starting with the Eye, which says Duran. A few of those, I think. Postecoglou hits out at claims that Spurs want to lose. Guardian, likewise, Duran substitutes double, saves point for Villa. Fury's father left with head-cutting clash with Usyk entourage, and Guardiola set for squeaky bum time in title fights. The Times, don't cheer us on to lose. More references for Postecoglou. United's leak embarrassment, and Duran on song for Villa. The Metro says we do want to win. Blood and butts as fight week kicks off. The Telegraph, Saudi's eye raid for United duo. And The Sun, Duran want to lose, that's not sport, and Bruno eyeing a final goodbye. So there we go. Right, we're going to start with The Guardian then, gentlemen, and Miguel. Let's start on tonight's game. Another breathless encounter in the Premier League. We'll get on to all the title race stuff in just a minute, but Villa had a chance tonight to clinch that Champions League spot. Didn't quite happen. They're inching closer. What did you make of it all?
Yeah, I think it was actually all the more impressive from Villa because a lot of this game seemed to show a problem that's been coming over the past 2 months, really. That obviously this is a relatively thin squad that was fighting on two fronts, Europe and trying to get into the Champions League. Something was always going to give. It did give in Europe. I don't think that's to take away from the squad, given how stretched they were. And just to the point when it was looking like they could finish the season quite flat, I thought they responded really impressively tonight and could have won the game, of course. It was a show of real character and resolve. And I mean, just maybe because of the way the season's ended, there's been this talk about how other clubs could have done better in trying to kind of claim Champions League and the eventual fourth place team was falling into it. I don't think that's the case. And I think a result like this emphasises that. And while I suppose for the benefit of the title race as well, it does keep everything alive more on the Spurs side tomorrow, although obviously Ange Postecoglou, which we'll come on to, would bristle at any suggestion that this might have an effect.
Yeah, we'll get to Postecoglou in just a second. But your thoughts, Charlie, on Villa? I mean, it didn't start well for them, didn't it? I think the commentators just built up the Alisson versus Martinez battle. Martinez pushes one into the back of his own net, but they did respond well eventually, Villa.
Yeah, Martinez, one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League, and it's just a reminder that all keepers have bad days. They, all make big mistakes. Doesn't matter who they are. And Martinez obviously suffered a bit of a nightmare right at the start and potentially at fault for one of the other Liverpool goals as well. But look, big point for Aston Villa, a deserved point for Villa. And that, really puts them in command now. And I think they deserve to finish fourth. I mean, Tottenham have been great to watch, most of the time. But Villa, also considering that, they've been in European competition, they've had a semi-final. I think that run's had an impact as well, apart from the injuries and just the loss of form. So it's a brilliant story. And it'd be great to see Villa, back in the Champions League next year if they do close it out. And I expect them to do it. OK, just a word on Liverpool, Miguel, because Jurgen Klopp's last away game, he managed to avoid that dreaded yellow card, which means he'll be on the touchline against Wolves. That was quite important for the finishing off of the Klopp era. But they had nothing really to play for, but they gave a pretty good account of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, the talk has been a little bit of an anticlimax, given what Liverpool could have done in the last 2 months. What would it have been if he couldn't actually be there or be on the bench in that way on Sunday? But no, I thought the way they gave away two goals is a disgrace. Klopp must go. Generally, it was a good attacking performance, but I suppose you could see some of the issues that just have prevented them doing more of what they could have done. I mean, ultimately with this Liverpool team, and it's one of the ironies of Klopp leaving in that sense. While he feels at the end, and when he's talked about obviously being out of energy, I think he's put together a team that is very much at a starting point. And in fact, like Carragher said this on Sky Sports a few times, and I agree with him. I think a proper title challenge was probably a bit ahead of schedule, but there is something for Arne Slot and the rest of the wider football team now, given how they've reshaped to do something with and to build with. And Klopp's obviously been crucial to that. And Sunday is going to be a very emotional occasion to recognise to be honest, not just one of the great managers in the Premier League, but one of the great managers in modern football history.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to focus now on the title race and go to the back of the Times and these comments from Ange Postecoglou, Charlie, who was really strong on this today. Don't cheer us on to lose. Couldn't kind of fathom where the fans were coming from. He's been part of the Celtic-Rangers rivalry and he's not having a bar of this. The fans want Tottenham to lose this match. He certainly is not intending to lose it, and his players are pretty focused as well, was his suggestion.
Intriguing situation, isn't it? And I fully expected Postecoglou to basically talk about this in this way and sort of saying how he does not understand any fan wanting their team to lose. But equally, if he took a step back, in his heart of hearts, he must see and hear in terms of what fans feel about this game. He must get that. He gets football, and I totally understand why a lot of Spurs fans tomorrow night will just not want Arsenal to win the title. And, they obviously, won't enjoy seeing their team lose if that happens. Obviously, they have to beat Manchester City to, remain, in the frame of scraping a Champions League spot. But look, I do get Tottenham fans. I know quite a few Spurs supporters and a few of them aren't going, and a lot of them just cannot bear the prospect of Arsenal winning the title after 20 years. So I think Postecoglou, why he's saying the right things, I'm not sure he really feels that. He must surely understand how the supporters of that football club feel right now.
Yeah, well, that's really borne out, Charlie, by the inside of the Telegraph, a piece here by Sam Dean, quoting some Tottenham fans here. Help Arsenal, no, Miguel, it says here, stick skipping goal and let's do the Poznan, just a kind of hint there of where a lot of Spurs fans are coming from here.
Yeah, I mean, similar to Charlie, I've been speaking to friends who are Spurs fans today, some of whom I've quoted for an article tomorrow. And one of the lines that stood out was, we can't be the reason that Arsenal win the title, or that lot win the title. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And I mean, Spurs fans, they're in an invidious position here. It's just, I mean, and like, I think, as Charlie's referenced there, and there's been stuff going around social media today about if you want a Spurs ticket tomorrow, it's probably the easiest game to get because a lot of fans, they don't want to be in the position of going to the game. And well, obviously, just because they're there, it's their team, they have to support them. They know the potential consequences of that, which is giving their biggest rivals what they've been waiting for 20 years. And the quip is already ready-made. It could be the third time that Arsenal win the league in that area, White Hart Lane, after 71 and 2004. But there is actually, I wonder, is there's a potential outcome here that suits everyone except maybe Man City, but it could suit them too, which is, and it would certainly suit broadcasters and neutrals, a draw, which means Spurs don't win the game but don't lose it, and it goes to the final day and it's a direct shootout. And a shootout for goal difference, similar to the Scottish Premier League in 2003. And who got the winning goal on that occasion for Rangers? Mikel Arteta.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating stuff, Charlie, isn't it? I just wonder whether Spurs fans would sacrifice the Champions League to stop Arsenal. If you gave them the choice, Arsenal win the Premier League, but you can get Champions League. Because if you think about the last games of the season, Tottenham have got Sheffield United and Villa have got to go to Crystal Palace and get a draw if Tottenham win both their remaining games. And that's not going to be straightforward the way Palace are playing.
I still feel a lot of Tottenham fans would miss out on the Champions League so Arsenal don't win the title. I mean, look, Tottenham have improved on last season. They are going to be in Europe now, and they thoroughly deserve that as well. And there's lots of things to look forward to under Postecoglou. So let's not forget they have had a decent season. There's been frustrations there. They've lost their best player in Harry Kane last summer, and so they are going to be back into Europe. So it's not as though I think. Again, if it had been this game had hinged on getting into Europe, but it is the Champions League. I get it. Obviously, Daniel Levy is going to be wanting to be in the Champions League. The sums of money involved. So, of course, everyone, within the club actually want to win that match to beat Villa. But I totally get Spurs fans that for them it would be a nightmare to see Arsenal win the title.
Well, don't just expect to get an angry phone call, Charlie, from an Ange Postecoglou a little bit later. He watches this show, We're going to move on to the back of the Guardian then, talk about the Manchester City take. Guardiola set for squeaky bum time in title fight. Miguel, I mean, he's been making all the right noises as well. They've just got to focus on what they can do, because they know if they slip up, that's pretty much title gone.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly it. Focused. If there's anything Guardiola City have exemplified in his 5 titles in 6 years so far, it's exactly that. Because I mean, I've been looking at this, and obviously, I suppose we've all been poring over this sort of thing over the last few weeks. You look for little signs, things like that, but in proper run-in games that Guardiola has been involved in England, so say with 7 games to go, titles on the line, that's over 20 games with Guardiola, he's only dropped 2 points. That was a 2-2 draw at West Ham. And obviously it feels like in this run-in, that's been escalated, because since the 0-0 draw at against Arsenal, which came with 7 games to go, they've won all 7 games and have an average of 4 goals a game in that. I mean, most of those games have involved goals in the 15 minutes. So for all we're talking about the emotion swirling around this and the strangeness of the occasion, if you go by City's own form, whatever about what happens at White Hart Lane there, usually they could just take all of this out of the equation. And of course, that's something else that's come up in the build-up to this match, about how City do have a poor record in this stadium. They've never won there in the league. Their first result was that defeat in the Champions League. But the one thing I would say about that is all of those were against a very specific type of football, which is essentially the Mourinho approach. And he was responsible for 2 of them. Sit deep, frustrate, and counter. And I think everything we know about Postecoglou, he just doesn't play that way. And City have already won there this season.
Yeah, it's a good point. I was going to throw that record back at you about City at Tottenham Hotspur, but I think that's a pretty compelling argument. Charlie, just quickly, just give us a prediction of how you think this is going to play out on Tuesday night and then the final weekend.
I think City will win. I think it might be a relatively tight game. There still might be a few nerves from the City team, despite their obvious experience. And to a degree, there's not that much pressure on Spurs. They know they've obviously got to win, but because, as I said earlier, they're certain of European football, I think it'll be a fascinating game. I think City will win, and I still think they're going to win the title.
OK, gentlemen, for now, thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the back pages, including this. In the Sun, Bruno eyeing a final buy. Watching Back Pages tonight, and welcome back to our guests Miguel Delaney and Charlie Wyatt. So right, let's go to the front of the Telegraph Sport, and an article here by a friend of the show, actually Jason Burt, who says Casemiro and Fernandes top wish list of Pro League clubs. Also mentions swoops for Alisson, Edison and Salah being weighed up. But Miguel, let's just focus on Manchester United for just a minute. Casemiro, but I guess more significantly, given his importance to the team, Bruno Fernandes. What do you make of this story?
I think this is really interesting. I mean, the Casemiro one, given where he is in his career and was given his performance in the last 2 games, we could have predicted this, I suppose. Bruno, not so much. Now, the Saudi Pro League, we know they'll put in a bid for any star in that sense to see what they can get, given they did it with Mbappe. But I suppose the very interesting thing here is whether United will consider it. And there's 2 kind of tensions to this. One is obviously that if you're to look at this United squad now and pick out players you'd want to keep, Bruno Fernandes is probably one of the few. He's acquitted himself well over the past few years. He's been one of the better performers. But this comes in a context where the new United hierarchy actively want to completely overhaul the squad. But that's in a situation where they're already close to profit and sustainability limits. And because of those limits in general, we know this is very much a buyer's market. Clubs are finding it difficult to sell. So suddenly if you have a sellable asset like Bruno in that way, well, if they do, I mean, given his age too, to be fair, which is into late 20s now, I mean, it's still relatively young, but I suppose they could be looking in a different direction. Suddenly it doesn't feel like a transfer that's completely unrealistic, especially it depends how invested in a complete overhaul they are this summer, because this could kickstart things. And I think that's where this this news story is really interesting from Jason. And one even, I suppose it comes down to maybe Bruno himself, because to my mind, given all that and given all the evidence and what United have to consider this summer, it's certainly an offer that they would think about, I believe.
Yeah, and Charlie, in your paper, The Sun, your colleague Neil Custis is going along with this as well. Bruno is eyeing a final bye. The FA Cup final could be his Manchester United swan song.
Look, I think there's going to be a lot of changes at United in the summer, isn't it? Both in terms of personnel and potentially the manager. Fernandes, what, 4.5 years at Manchester United? When you look at some of the terrible signings they've made and how much money they've wasted, obviously Fernandes is in that group of one of the players that's been pretty good value, isn't he? He's done really well. I don't think he's a very good captain, but he's generally been an excellent player. But as Miguel said, if United could get a really decent sum of money for him and that player wants to leave, and who knows, if there is a new manager comes in and he's happy with that departure, which would enable him to bring in some of the players that he wants, it's definitely a deal that could happen. And Saudi Arabia is an interesting one. That's not going to go away. All the money in those clubs there, while it doesn't really have the profile. We don't watch Saudi football that much, do we? And it only really sort of comes to the fore in the transfer windows. But they're obviously going to sign quite a few players. And as Jason's mentioned in the Telegraph, the likes of Edison and Alisson as well. Mo Salah, I still think he could well go this year. The interest was there from Saudi last year. At some stage, he'll definitely play in Saudi Arabia. So there could be potentially quite a lot of movement there this summer. But either way, Fernandes, is looking maybe to leave Old Trafford.
Yeah, we're just going to go back to that Jason Burt article that you mentioned there, Charlie, because it says that up to 10 marquee signings, Miguel, could be on their way to Saudi. We've seen them, you've mentioned it as well, they're big players now in the transfer. We don't see a lot of the football, but they're big players, and then they're only going to keep throwing more and more money at during these windows.
Well, it just struck me there, as Charlie mentioned that as well, about how we don't really see it now, bar the transfer window. And if you put that in a wider context as well, what's happened since the last major transfer window last summer? Saudi Arabia has got the World Cup. They got that in October 2023. So we've essentially got a decade build-up until Saudi Arabia, and it's going to involve a lot of debate and a lot of controversy, where Saudi Arabia will be the centre of the football world. And if you think about what Qatar did in the 12 years before their World Cup, well, they bought a football club, even through PSG and the signing of Neymar, they completely upturned the transfer market. So within that sort of context, and how essentially this is a national project, the entire league, I think all of this is only going to escalate over the next decade. And again, this summer, despite the fact so far it's felt a little bit quieter, although there weren't that many murmurs this time last year about just how big they could go. It wasn't until June that it really kicked off. But we could well see someone. And I suppose the only thing is they've already filled a lot of the international spots, but those rules have already been loosened. And so, given that it is part of something bigger now, we could well see bigger signings.
OK, we're going to go back to Manchester United. This story in the Times, United's leak embarrassment, Charlie, from Paul Hurst. We saw the footage from their game the other night. The water, it was torrential rain, wasn't it? Cascading through the roof, the leak, some journalists got stuff wet. It's kind of symbolic of where Manchester United are at. There's this talk of a new stadium. They're not going to fix the roof until they know what's going on there. It's all a bit of a mess.
It's embarrassing, isn't it? And if the water got into the away dressing rooms. I feel sorry for the fans who have been complaining about the leaking roofs for some times now. This isn't a new thing, and it's humiliating, isn't it? When you think Manchester United, one of the great clubs in England, one of the biggest clubs in the world, and we've got the Euros here in Britain in 4 years' time, and Old Trafford is not even being considered for being one of the venues. How embarrassing is that? I agree that maybe they do need to knock it down and start again. And I totally understand why a lot of fans would not feel that way. But again, going back to Tottenham Hotspur, I think most fans, the fact that that ground is in a similar area to where their old stadium was, I think it works. And that's why I think as a project, Old Trafford would work right next door because at the moment I just don't see the point of wasting hundreds of millions of pounds to sort of redevelop that stadium where they may as well just start again and hopefully have a roof that doesn't leak.
Absolutely, good thinking. A roof that doesn't leak. Right, let's move on. We're going to go back to the back of the Metro and focus on blood and butts as fight week kicks off. This, of course, the undisputed world heavyweight title fight between Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury, and Miguel John Fury, Tyson's dad, headbutting someone in the Fury camp today, it would appear. Is this all part of the kind of distraction, just trying to take some of maybe the pressure off Fury and trying to kind of make some of the attention about him? It's kind of what football managers do, isn't it?
It did feel like that now, to go with, I suppose, the usual circus that kind of comes around these events. It's funny, actually, given, I suppose, we were just mentioning, said the Saudi Pro League a few moments ago. I mean, this is all part of the same sort of thing, given the fights in Riyadh. It's funny, all the talk today about this going too far. Well, I mean, look what the event is, look where it is. But yeah, it is part of the show, for want of a better word. And already 6 days out, or 5 days out, sorry, you know, people are talking about it. It's hard not to just reduce it to those terms.
Yeah, Charlie, I'm not sure about your boxing kind of pedigree, but who are you picking to win this one?
I think Fury looks in really good shape. He looks really lean. And, you know, it shows you what a crazy day it was today, where he seemed to be one of the people there, the sane ones. He seemed to sort of keep his head. And, well, I think he was doing a Sky Sports interview when the headbutt happened. But yeah, I think his dad let himself down, really, and didn't do his son any favours. And I don't think he did the fight any favours, really. You know, obviously, I sort of agree with Miguel in terms of it all being a bit of a show. But I tell you what, you know, if you're going to be in one country where you're going to start misbehaving in that sort of situation, Saudi Arabia isn't one of them. That was a bit of a gamble there. You know, he's not going to get into any trouble. But yeah, I think if you can do that sort of thing, Saudi Arabia probably wasn't the right place. So he's a bit fortunate there.
OK, right, gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Miguel, and to Charlie. Just in the back of the Telegraph, it also talks about Rory McIlroy. McIlroy, wait, a matter of inches, not years. James Corrigan's column. He is returning to the PGA Championship, to the scene of his last triumph after 10 years of hurt.